Jim South. I'm a police officer with the St. Anthony Police Department.
How many years have you been with the St. Anthony Police Department?
13 and a half years.
13 and a half years?
Yep.
Okay. And so you started new training recently with the police department?
Yeah, there's kind of been some new initiatives that have been set forth by our police department, as well as some initiatives that have been legislated through the state. And so we've been working very diligently at trying to integrate all those throughout the department.
Mm-hmm. What are those initiatives kind of surrounding?
Well, there's something called ICAT, which is called Integrating Communications Assessment and Tactics. So it's a way of putting de-escalation along with our regular tactics that we use in regards to de-escalating situations and apprehending people.
So de-escalation, that's relating to like when you guys pull folks over, or is it related to any sort of situation where you're dealing with the public? Or
yeah, it can run the gamut. So prior to this technical assistance we received from the COPS office, so I had gone through a 40-hour CAT class, which is crisis intervention team training. So it's dealing with people and how to de-escalate them when they're in a mental health crisis. And so I went through that back in 2009 was when I went through the initial 40-hour training. And then I went to training to become a coach. And so when we do the de-escalation part of the class, they have a coach there to kind of help the students through the process and help make them better at what they're doing. So I became a coach, and then 4 years ago I became an instructor for the Barbara Schneider Foundation, which is they do a lot of the CIT training around the metro area for a lot of agencies, as well as hospital workers, correctional staffs, things like that. So I've been a trainer for them for 4 years. So even prior to our technical assistance, we had already had the forethought of getting somebody involved in that CIT training. So I actually put on a class here for our whole department has had at least 1 8-hour day. We did a refresher this year, and then we also did a refresher 2 years ago. So we just had our defensive tactics training last week, and I did a refresher part of the CIT aspect of it during the defensive tactics training. So
like obviously sometimes when you're out on a call, maybe like the type of interaction you have as a police officer with someone who's having some sort of problem or something versus like, you and me right now. So did this training kind of help figure out like ways to talk in those sort of different situations, or?
It kind of gives you tools and gives you kind of a baseline as to how you want to go about getting to a good result at the end. And so, the whole thing is, if we can show empathy towards people, you can build that rapport. And once you build that rapport, you can help them come up with solutions. I've dealt with, the last week or so, I've dealt with a couple of very intense situations where people were having trauma, in their life, whatever that may be. One of them was on a traffic stop. And just the fact that I stopped the guy because he had expired tabs and his license was suspended and he had no insurance, that was a traumatic thing for him. And so that threw him into crisis. And so I had to spend 45 minutes on a traffic stop trying to de-escalate the guy because he was so upset. And then we had another one in the middle of the night. A lady was walking down the street with knives, yelling and screaming. And there was, nobody knew what was going on or why she was doing it. When I arrived, luckily she had put the knives down. But she was definitely going through a mental health crisis, and I was able to talk to her and get some information out of her and get her calmed down enough to be able to make the decision to go in the ambulance on her own down to the hospital to get the help that she needed. So it's really more tools as to how to interact with people, and kind of some of the clues that you're looking for when you're talking to them. How to express empathy towards people, active listening skills, paying attention to your own body language, along with the other person's body language. We're always taught as officers to watch people's, if they're tensing up or their eyes are looking around to see if they're gonna, flee or whatever. But they're also paying attention to everything that we're doing, what our posture's like, if we're nodding and agreeing with them or giving them some sort of feedback, making eye contact. Our hands, if our hands are very active, it could threaten them, how close you are to them. So things like that, those are all, things that we have to be conscious of while we're talking to people, depending on what situation they're in.
So you've been doing it for 13 and a half years, and just think of from my experience, like what you're talking about, like the woman with the knife or this guy kind of blowing up, I could picture in my head, how I might change my view of the world because of some of those situations. So, and I don't know, does this training have anything to do with sort of like mentally kind of taking self-care with yourself, or trying to not become jaded, which can be tough to do?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many pieces to it. It's a 40-hour class, so there's so many different pieces to the puzzle. But that self-care piece is very important. Obviously officer safety is of high priority to all of us, because we have families, and, the public, safety is utmost important above our own. So we have to take care of ourselves, and, the biggest piece of it is that you can't be emotional when you're dealing with these things. You can't let personal emotions get involved with what you're doing on the job. So if you had, say for instance, you have a family member that suffers from mental health, issues, and there was a situation that you were involved with that family member, and it was very traumatic for you, and now you're dealing with this person out on the street, and it's very similar to what you had at home, that could trigger some emotional response to that, whether it be anger or whatever. And in those cases, they say you may want to get another officer there so you don't have that personal conflict involved, because that's not going to help the situation. So, and then also, dealing with your own health and activity levels too. You see a lot of traumatic things in this job, stuff that nobody should ever have to see in their whole entire life, And so, it's very important that we take care of our own mental health as well.
Can you feel effects of this training in the police department at all since you kind of started it, or do you feel like it's making a positive impact?
Absolutely. I think it's just honing our skills and making us better at what we've already been doing. It's just giving us extra tools for a tool belt for when we go out and deal with these situations. And I think that it's really, helping us out a lot, and helping the younger officers as well. And, keeping the older officers kind of in tune with, kind of the trends, so to speak. But we've gone through fair and impartial policing, as well as procedural justice training. And I've been trained as a instructor in both of those, and Sergeant Huddle is also an instructor for procedural justice. So when we get new officers in, we have the ability to put them through that training as well.
What were the two things you said?
Fair and impartial policing, and then procedural justice. It's just basically kind of, how basically you treat people like people, and then, that's pretty much it. We're all people, and let's just treat each other, the golden rule type thing,
Right.
So there's lots of nuances and pieces to the puzzle, obviously, throughout the training. But, in general terms, see people as people.
Do you have any ideas maybe why you think it can be hard for some people to try to do that, or why training is so important to kind of keep that in your frame of mind?
As far as why it would be hard for people to think that way, that's a good question. Everybody's different, and I guess I can't answer that for people. I would just be guessing, and I don't want to, it could be how you're raised, could be trauma in your life that's caused you to think certain ways. It could be so many different things that, What was your second part of that question?
Just making sure it kind of stays at the forefront.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the reason why we do the training, is because we want to, that's part of our strategic goals, is, to keep that, in the forefront of our policing, is, we're treating people like people.
Any more just a last statement on the specific training you've been doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think de-escalation training is very important for everybody. I think that it's a tool that can be used by anyone in any situation, whether it be at school or in the workplace. It's a way for all of us to be able to speak with people in a empathetic way to try to gain trust with people that are in crisis. And the biggest piece is to try to get them the resources that they need, to get them the help that they need, so they aren't suffering from, whatever crisis they're going through.